at the end of the day, no one knows who the he is. And he's gonna be that guy when I'm world champion, when I'm a legend. He's gonna be at some pub, talking some shit about, I beat that guy one time, trying to get a dick sucked from a crack whore or some shit.
Israel Adesanya, during the peak of his UFC career, gave an interview and said that his biggest opponent in the kickboxing days, Alex Pereira, has retired and will be glorifying those wins against him, sitting in a bar drunk since his career is finished, while he'll be on top of the world, still going strong. And it seemed normal then, but Izzy might have mistakenly poked a sleeping bear. After hearing this interview, Poatan was convinced he had to conquer Style Bender once more. A motivated Poatan started transitioning to MMA and got to join the UFC, and the rest we know is history. He once again relived the moment of beating his rival at what he did best in MMA. This led to a turn for the worse for Adesanya, who's not recovered from that blip. While he did win the rematch in style as well, he's gone on a 3-fight losing streak. Meanwhile, the fighter he once mocked became the champion by beating him and became a phenomenon in the game. That is Poatan, Chama. What a turn of events. Two fighters went in two different directions after an interview. Poatan went straight to the top from nothing, while Adesanya, who was at the top of the game, went down the hill and is still rolling down as fast as possible. Let's dive deep into Adesanya and his career since the interview and find out, is he on the wrong end of the game? In the world of combat sports, some rivalries stand the test of time. They ignite, burn bright, and leave a mark in the hearts of fans forever. But few rivalries have been as explosive, as personal, or as unforgettable as the one between Israel Adesanya and Alex Pereira. On one side, there is a dancing technical striker with a swagger unmatched by anyone in his weight class. The other is a monster of power and precision, whose left hook is as dangerous as any weapon on God's green earth. They've met in the ring before, and the true story of their rivalry didn't begin in the UFC, it started years ago in the world of kickboxing. Israel Adesanya, born in Nigeria but raised in New Zealand, quickly became one of the most electric fighters in the kickboxing world, known for his elusive style, his slick footwork, and his ability to break down opponents with his creativity. Adesanya was on top of the world in kickboxing, but there was one fighter who kept getting under his skin, Alex Pereira. Pereira, a Brazilian powerhouse with a brutal left hook and iron will, was the one man who seemed to have Adesanya's number. 2 times Pereira beat Adesanya in kickboxing, including one knockout that still haunts Israel to this day. It was the kind of loss that would define Adesanya's career in kickboxing, and it would have launched Pereira to superstardom if all had gone according to plan, but for the Brazilian, it didn't. Izzy left the striking world to focus on mixed martial arts, a discipline he wanted to conquer after reigning supreme in kickboxing. Some might say he left after that brutal Pereira knockout. Well, maybe. And that move proved to be the starting point for what would be a legendary run in the game. Just 2 years later, Adesanya was at the summit of the UFC middleweight throne. The king of middleweight, undefeated in the UFC. Cocky, arrogant, ultra-popular, successful, bold, and controversial, Adesanya was all in one. That might have been too much sometimes, but nobody could argue. Continuing in this vein, he gave an interview to Sporting News Australia in late 2020 where he made a bold claim. Most fans were unaware of the phenomenon that was Alex Poatan Pereira, so nobody made a big deal out of it. It was a statement full of confidence and maybe a little too much arrogance. This would ignite a fire in Pereira that would alter the trajectory of both their careers. Pereira wasn't just going to fade into obscurity after hearing Adesanya mock him. No, this was his motivation. He wasn't just going to sit around and let Adesanya talk like that. He would come back, and not just come back for Adesanya, but he had a new goal. He was going to take over MMA. He began his ascent to the UFC middleweight throne. Pereira dove into MMA training, learning new skills, adapting his legendary striking, and adding bits of wrestling and jiu-jitsu and whatever that could help his game. 6 months later, he made his LFA debut against Thomas Powell on November 20th, 2020. He joined the UFC after that fight. We all know what happened next. Within just 2 years, Pereira transitioned from a kickboxing legend to an MMA prospect with a vision. Pereira went on an absolute tear in the UFC. He fought through a tough middleweight division, showing everyone that his striking skills are on another level with that left hand. And all the while, his ultimate goal remained in focus to face Adesanya in the UFC and finish what he started years ago. Props to Dana for his knack for finding narratives in the fight game. Meanwhile, Israel Adesanya continued his dominance. The man was on top of the world. He was defending his title with ease, his striking fluid and crisp, his confidence skyrocketing. It seemed like no one could touch him. He was at the top of the MMA mountain, a champion with no equal. But despite his success, there was something in the back of Adesanya's mind. He knew what he'd said about Pereira, and he knew that one day Alex would come knocking at his door. And finally, we all heard the loud knock on the middleweight title gate once he finished Strickland with a vicious left hook. The moment had arrived. Adesanya versus Pereira. The middleweight title is on the line. Two men, two arch rivals facing off in the UFC octagon. The energy was electric. Fans were buzzing, analysts were debating, and the stakes couldn't be higher. In one of the most shocking upsets in UFC history, Pereira did the unthinkable. He knocked out Adesanya, dethroning the middleweight king and becoming the new champion. It was a moment of redemption for Pereira, a moment years in the making. The man who once mocked him was now a victim of his power laying on the floor. But this story didn't end there. Adesanya is no quitter. In their highly anticipated rematch, Adesanya would prove that he's not just a fighter but a champion with heart. He found a way to outclass Pereira using his superior technique, footwork, and strategy to reclaim his title. It was a victory that put him back on top, but for how long? Since that win, Israel has lost 3 in a row, all but the last for the title. Last weekend, he lost to Nassourdine Imavov in the UFC Fight Night main event in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Adesanya is in uncharted territory in his combat sports career after he was left with a 3rd consecutive loss on his resume. Imavov dropped and stopped him for a knockout in the 2nd round of the middleweight headliner in Saudi. The former kickboxer is now 1-4 in his past 5 bouts. While Adesanya was simply destroyed by Sean Strickland, he looked competitive in both of his recent losses to UFC middleweight champion DDP and Imavov, but nobody thought he would be finished like that by the latter. So, is he on the way out of the game? With 3 back-to-back losses, is this time to call it quits? Although Adesanya is consistently facing the best of fighters, he still finds himself in a tough spot, which leads to question his status in the game. We've seen him just destroy people, bamboozle the audience with his flashy tricks, and then finish his opponents easily, but that doesn't happen anymore. Maybe after a long career at the top, where he's taken a lot of wear and tear on the body, that is starting to show its side effects. This is the first time he was defeated in a non-title bout in MMA, and that feels like a big deal. Perhaps a significant moment in the downturn potentially for him. The losing skid isn't maybe as bad as it seems for some, considering the 3 previous losses came to former champions. It feels like he could lose 10 straight more, and it would still not affect what he's done and his contributions to this beautiful sport. After the event, his first reaction to the loss offered some positivity.
I have to chill and then think about things. I'll relax first for a little bit, just help the teammates who have fights coming up, and yeah, see what I want to do. I was going to do that anyway, but, you know, now I'm forced to.
But then again, a loss is a loss, and he needs to get back on the winning side as soon as possible if he wants to stay in the fight game. So what's next for Stylebender? Adesanya, now off the throne, has to fend off a new wave of challenges to get there. MMA is a constantly evolving sport, and the young guns of the middleweight division are coming for him. So, can he come back to the top, or will he fade like a wayward champ? As the future unfolds, one thing is for certain: Adesanya's legacy, whether he's at the top or not, will be remembered for years to come. Whatever happens next, one thing's for sure: we will all be there for the ride. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more MMA content, and let us know in the comments, what do you think will happen to Adesanya next? Is he finished in the game? Will he recover from this losing streak? Let's find out, and I'll catch you in the next one. But before you go, check out the video on your left where we explore the possibility of Georgian wrestling being better than Dagestani wrestling.